Hi, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our program. Today is Decision 2022. My name is Susan. I work here at the main library. Our presenter today is Monica Elliot, and she is the president of the League of Women Voters of Broward County. And she's going to explain all the ins and outs about voting. So welcome, Monica, to our program. And I'm going to stop sharing so you can share your screen now.
So good morning. My name is Monica Elliot, and as Susan mentioned, I'm president of the League of Women Voters here in Broward County. Just want to mention a few things about the League. We are a nonpartisan political organization. And by nonpartisan, that means we never support or oppose political candidates or parties. However, we are political. We do encourage informed and active participation in government, and we work to increase understanding of major policy issues. And then we do advocate for policies and changes that we have agreed at the grassroots level is important for people to know. We were established in 1920 when women got the right to vote. In 1972, men were allowed to join the League of Women Voters, but that name is still going to stick. We do research, we educate, and advocate. So today's program is Decision 2022. Your voice is your power, and you obtain that power through your vote. What we're going to cover is why you should be voting, how to register to vote, the process of voting, what's on the ballot, and how to check on your vote by mail ballot. Over 50% of the people who voted in the August 23rd primary election voted by mail. And we want to be sure that people are making sure they're doing things correctly so that their vote by mail ballot is counted. So here's some reasons that people don't vote. They believe that their vote isn't going to matter, that their voice is irrelevant, or that the system is rigged. And that simply is not true at all. Registering to vote and even voting is confusing. I mean, think about anytime you do something for the first thing. It can always be difficult. And so people just avoid it. But we want to encourage people to take the time to do it. And especially with vote by mail, it's something that you can do at home. Some of the other obstacles is sometimes a polling place is too far away. Again, the advantage of vote by mail. The line may be too long, or sometimes people get removed in the voter registration roll. And I'll talk about why that may occur. Again, why should you be voting? Essentially, everything that affects your life is associated with government services. And the people who provide those government services are elected officials. They can provide or eliminate services. They could increase or reduce the funding associated with those services, or make it easier or harder to sign up. So it doesn't matter the level of government. It could be your local city government, local county government, state or federal, but these elected officials make decisions about the services you receive. That should be enough reason right there for you to go out and vote. In 2016, 92 million people who could have voted did not vote. They were the largest group of voters in that year. Now, voting has improved, but not as much as it should have, especially here in Broward County. So on the slide, I'm showing you the voter turnout in 2018. These are the number of registered voters in Broward County alone. It was just over 1 million people. And you can see that the number who voted was just over 700,000. But then look at that number that did not vote in 2018, our last midterm election, almost 500,000 people. Now, the vote difference statewide between candidates for governor in that year was only 32,463. It was actually a very close race for governor. And again, look at the number of people in Broward County alone who did not vote. Now in 2020, our last presidential election, Voter turnout did improve, but we still had over 300,000 people in Broward County alone who did not vote. So voting benefits people who vote. Another reason why you should be voting. Again, all those services that you receive the government are ultimately controlled by elected officials. Voting gives you rights, and you need to exercise that right by voting. Some of the requirements to register to vote here in Florida: yes, you do need to be a U.S. resident. You need to be a Florida resident, at least 18 years old, although we can register or pre-register youth if they're 16 to 18. And then when they turn 18, they will get their voter information card. No court order of mental incapacity, or it has been restored, and no felony conviction or the right to vote must have been restored. Those are 5 requirements in order for a person to be eligible to register to vote. So we encourage people to register to vote, although in Broward County, I will say a large percentage of people are already registered. And oftentimes what you need to do is update your current registration. Now, if you want to vote in the November 8th election, you have to do that by October 11th, because you have to be registered to vote at least 29 days before an election. And so for the November 8th election date, that means you have to be registered by October 11th. Online registration is probably the best way to go. And that's also the way to update your registration, although it will require having your Florida driver's license or your Florida ID, both that you get from the motor vehicle department. And then for security purposes, you also need the last 4 numbers of your Social Security. And by doing it online at the registertovoteflorida.gov, the little symbol down there at the bottom, it then is going to tie your voter registration to your driver's license, so that the signature on your Florida driver's license or Florida ID then becomes the signature of record for registration purposes too. So if you do vote by mail, all you have to do is look at your Florida driver's license or your Florida ID, and you know what your signature should look like on that mailing envelope. There are paper forms available. You can obtain those at the library. And so you can do it by paper. You can either register for the first time by paper, or you can update your registration. When you do it by paper, you either need to have your Florida driver's license or Florida ID, or the last 4 numbers of your Social Security. You don't need to have both. Whereas when you register online, you do need to have both. And that's simply for security reasons. So who is impacted by these voter identification requirements? Because they can be onerous for certain people. Voters of color and low-income communities, older and younger adults, people with disabilities, they may not have the identification required to be able to register to vote. So one organization that does help people obtain identification is voteriders.org. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. And you can call or text the number that's shown on the screen, and they assist people in both English and Spanish. And it's not only that they help people obtain the ID doing the paperwork, they may even be able to help pay for some of the documents you may need in order to get the proper identification. So remember voteriders.org if you know somebody who is having problems obtaining the proper identifications for voting purposes, by either voter registration or for in-person voting. So should a returning citizen register to vote? We always say yes, but only if you're sure all terms of the sentence have been completed, and that includes the fees and the fines. Because you have to remember, it's a felony to falsely swear you're eligible to vote if you are not. There's a number of different organizations who are helping returning citizens register to vote or obtain the information needed so they can register to vote. The League is doing this also. You can email canivote@lwvfl.org, or you can call the number on the screen. So if you are a returning citizen but are not sure if you can register to vote, please reach out to us. Removal from the registration rolls does occur. And that is because we do have election laws that require the supervisor of elections to maintain their lists. If you have not voted for 4 years, essentially 2 general election cycles, or you have not responded to any of the notices as a supervisor of election has sent you during that four-year period, you can be removed from the voter registration rolls. That is why we emphasize over and over again to check and update your voter registration today. Don't wait until the last minute. You should be doing that today. And you should definitely be doing it before October 11th. Because if you have been removed from the voter registration rolls, what you need to do is re-register. So now we're going to talk about getting ready to vote. One of the things that happened because of the 2020 census is that we have a lot of new districts. And these new district boundaries also involved doing a renumbering of those districts. So what you think is your US House or congressional district number may not, or probably is not, the same as what it was before. And this is likely to be true for the Florida Senate districts and the Florida House districts. And then the county commission districts also changed. The only districts that did not have significant changes in their boundaries was the school board districts. So you do need to check your voter information cards, and you have been sent, if you registered to vote prior to the August 23rd primary election, you should have received the voter information card issued by the supervisor of election. In fact, he sent out those cards twice, and those cards would have reflected the changes. And you need to check to see if your precinct has changed also, if you're going to be voting in person on election day. This is what the voter information card looked like. And it's going to show your precinct number, where you're going to vote in person on election day. And then you see down at the bottom left side, it's showing the US congressional district you live in, county commission, state senate, school board, state house, and the municipality, because some municipalities are divided up into districts. So this will indicate essentially who you are going to be voting for on election day. You can also find this information on the Supervisor of Elections website, and we'll be giving that information later. So on the ballot, we will have judicial elections and judicial retention votes. In Florida, we have a hybrid system of selecting our judges. For the Supreme Court and for the 4th District Court of Appeals, which is the district court district that we are in here in Broward County, these justices and judges are appointed by the governor, but they face a yes or no retention vote every 6th year. So on November 8th, there are 5 Supreme Court justices and 7 4th District Court of Appeals justices that will be on the ballot, where you're going to say, yes, you want to retain these justices or judges, or no, you do not. But we will also see races for circuit court and county court judges. We voted on, in some of these races, we did vote in August, but for circuit court and county court, you have to receive 50% of the vote plus 1 in order to win. And so we have 2 runoff races for the circuit court and 1 runoff race for county court judges on the November 8th ballot. These are nonpartisan elections. They are elected every 6 years. And this just gives you an idea of what a circuit court judge does. They're going to hear criminal felonies, civil disputes of over $30,000, probate, family, and juvenile criminal cases. County court judges are essentially the people's court. These are the civil disputes that are less than $30,000, traffic, and misdemeanors. So there's going to be 1 county and 2 circuit court runoff races on the November 8th ballot, in addition to the retention votes for Supreme Court justices and the 4th District Court of Appeals. So other people or races that are going to be on the November 8th ballot are listed here. We still have some Florida State Senate and representatives that will be on the ballot depending on which district you live in. We will also have 3 Florida constitutional amendments, which I will discuss later. And there are 2 Broward County charter questions. In addition, we will also have 20 cities with commission elections, and those cities may also have some charter amendments for their cities. There is 1 Broward commission race on the ballot, so it depends on if you're in that district or not. And then we have a lot of special districts. These are development districts or water control districts. Again, you have to register to vote by October 11th if you want to vote on November 8th. There will be both early voting and vote by mail available for this general election. So amending the Florida Constitution, there's 5 ways that we can propose constitutional amendments. The legislature can do it. We can do it by citizens' initiative, the Constitutional Revision Commission, which meets every 20 years, Taxation and Budget Reform Commission, which is relatively new, but it also meets every 20 years. And then there's also a constitutional convention, which has not happened since 1968. So on the November 8th ballot, there are 3 proposed amendments that were proposed by the legislature. These amendments must be approved by 60% of the voters in order to pass. And these are the 3 essentially titles of these amendments. 1 is to limit assessment of real property used for residential purposes. Secondly, abolishing the Constitutional Revision Commission that I just mentioned. And 3rd is adding an additional homestead property tax exemption for specific people. So Amendment 1, limitation on assessment of real property. This authorizes the state legislature to pass laws prohibiting flood-resistant improvements made to your personal property from being taken into consideration when that property's assessed value is done by your property appraiser in the county. So generally, whenever you make changes or improvements to your private residential property, you're going to result in adjustment, usually up, in the value of that property for tax purposes. A yes vote on this amendment will allow the legislature to pass a law to prohibit the property appraiser from increasing the assessed property value because you have made improvements to resist flood damage. A no vote will allow property appraisers to increase the property value if you make improvements to prevent flooding. There are no supporting organizations except that we know of yet, except for the legislature who did support it. And we don't know of any group that is actually opposing this particular amendment. The League is essentially remaining neutral on this amendment. Our long-term policy is that taxes should not be part of the Florida Constitution. However, just for your information, Floridians have previously passed amendments that allow the legislature to pass laws which prohibit property appraisers from considering property improvements for wind resistance, hurricane, and also installation of renewable energy, such as solar panels. And the League obviously is very concerned about sea level rise and sustainability. And so we do want people to be making improvements to their property in regards to flood damage also. Amendment 2 would abolish, if it passes, would abolish the Constitutional Revision Commission. Now, again, as I mentioned previously, the Constitutional Revision Commission is one of the 5 methods that allows amendments to be proposed to change the Constitution. It's been called every 20 years since 1978. It was last called in 2018. Many changes to the Constitution have been made because of their suggested amendments. The problem that came up in 2018 is that there seemed to be a bundling of constitutional amendments, and they were very difficult for people to understand. So if you were to vote yes for this amendment, it's going to eliminate one of the 5 methods for reviewing the Constitution for potential changes. If you vote no, it keeps the Constitutional Revision Commission in the Constitution, and the next commission would be called in 2038. Supporting organizations besides the legislature which proposed this, we're not aware of any at this time. Opposing organizations has been the Sun Sentinel, the Common Cause of Florida, and the League of Women Voters in Florida. We believe that this commission should be reformed, but it should not be abolished. We need to have as many ways as possible to change the Constitution if necessary. So again, we believe it should be reformed, but not abolished. Amendment 3 is dealing with the homestead property tax exemptions. And these is an exemption that would only apply to specified critical public services workforce personnel. It would authorize the Florida legislature to provide an additional homestead property tax exemption up to $50,000 of assessed value on property owned by certain public service workers. And here you can see the list of who this would include. It goes from classroom teachers to child welfare professionals. We would just like to note that there are a number of different homestead exemptions already that are for $25,000 or less, but that this one is for up to $50,000. So the residential property is granted a number of different homestead exemptions. And that is normally based on certain qualifications which the property owner must apply for. If you vote yes on this amendment, it will allow the legislature to grant homeowners in specific occupations an additional exemption of up to $50,000 from the taxable value of their property. This exemption is only going to apply to county and municipal taxes. There would be no exemption applied to the school taxes. This reduction in taxes collected by municipalities and the county will have to be met somehow if this is reduced. A no vote means no additional exemptions for these homeowners. Except for the legislature, which proposed this amendment, we are not aware of any other supporting organizations. The League does oppose this amendment. One, it's our long-term policy that taxes should not be part of the Florida Constitution. And there is a long list of various constitutional homestead exemptions already. And you will find these listed on the Broward County Property Appraiser's website, and I have indicated that here. Homestead exemptions are added by constitutional amendments, and they're rarely, if ever, eliminated. Again, this is the website for the Broward County Property Appraisers page, and it lists all the homestead exemptions that are currently in place. The current additional exemptions are applicable to those persons with disabilities, low-income seniors, surviving spouses and widows, deployed military, and granny flat additions for people 62 and older. And again, we just want to point out that this amendment is going to provide an additional exemption just for certain people, depending on their work, what area of employment they're in, and the exemption will be up to $50,000. There's also two Broward County charters questions that will be on the ballot. And both of these charter questions essentially are dealing with current county policies and changing them so that they will comply with new state laws. Now, with constitutional amendments, you have to have 60% or more a yes vote for that amendment to be placed into the Constitution. With the Broward County Charter, which is essentially like a mini constitution just for Broward County, charter questions must be approved by 50% plus one of the voters to pass. So the state constitution lists 5 constitutional officers who are elected in each county. These are the sheriff, the clerk of circuit court, property appraiser, supervisor of elections, and a tax collector. Since 1975, the Broward County Charter, we abolished the office of tax collector. And currently, the Broward County's finance department serves as a tax collector. Well, in 2018, voters at large throughout Florida, an amendment to the Florida Constitution was passed, and that amendment removed the ability of county charters like Broward to abolish offices that were listed as constitutional officers and transfer them to another office. Therefore, because of the state constitutional amendment, and that we need to change our charter so that we do elect a tax collector. And this person would be elected in 2024 to take office in January 2025. Still, the voters need to approve this charter. And so that is what this question is about. According to the Broward County Auditor, if this charter question passes, it will have no financial impact. So if you vote yes, it approves the charter change, and we will elect a tax collector here in Broward County. If you vote no, it rejects the charter change. And in all probability, someone is going to file a lawsuit that will force us to have an elected tax collector. So we certainly would recommend changing the charter and vote yes. Broward Charter question number 2 is also trying to consolidate our central examining boards and make sure that we are consistent with current state law. So effective July 1st, 2023, next year, local construction boards, you're probably not even aware that we have these boards, but there are a number of different construction trades that all had their own separate examining boards. What this charter question would do to comply with state law is that it would be consolidating into one central examining board. And then it would also eliminate the liquefied petroleum gas contractors central examining board, which you probably didn't even realize we had. But it would be eliminated because it actually falls under a different law. So by voting yes for this charter question, it makes the county charter consistent with the Florida laws, and it limits the county's authority to license certain occupations. According to the Broward County Auditor, if this charter question passes, the county will actually save approximately $147,000. So voting yes approves the charter change, voting no rejects the charter change. So moving on to the different ways to vote. There are 3 ways to vote. There's voting by mail, early voting during a specific time period at specific locations. And then on election day, you can vote at your precinct. And that precinct location information can be found on that voter information card, or you can also find it at the Broward Supervisor of Elections website. And this is a great website to memorize, browardvotes.gov. Everything you need to know about voting is located at that site. Our recommendation is that you do request a vote by mail ballot, because you just never know what is going to happen. And we don't know if we'll have another epidemic. We don't know what's going to happen with hurricanes. You just don't know. And so by requesting that vote by mail ballot, at least you have it and you can mail it, or you can drop it off at early voting sites. Receiving a vote by mail ballot does not require that you use it. If you change your mind, you can still vote in person, either during early voting or on election day. Essentially, it is a backup emergency process. So that is why we recommend requesting that vote by mail ballot. Before you do request your vote by mail ballot, make sure your residential address and your mailing address are up to date. These can actually be different, but they both must be up to date. So your residential address is important to be updated, because that determines who you're going to vote for. All those district boundaries I was talking about previously, that is determined by your residential address as to what district you will be located in. Your mailing address, perhaps you're going to be away for a long period of time. You have to go help an elderly parent. You can have your vote by mail ballot sent to that location. For college students, maybe your permanent residential address is here in Broward County, but you're currently living either out of state or at one of the Florida universities. Then you can have it sent to your mailing address. Just make sure that they are both up to date. And the reason this is important is that a vote by mail ballot cannot, let me repeat, it cannot be forwarded by the U.S. Postal Service. So if you do not have your addresses up to date, the post office knows you do not live at those locations, it's going to be sent back to the Supervisor of Elections office. You want to request a vote by mail ballot as soon as possible, because it's going to be mailed out very shortly. Sometime, usually about the first part of October, we'll start to see those ballots mailed out. The last day to request that a ballot be mailed to you is October 29th for the November 8th general election. After that date, they will not mail the ballot to you, because there just simply isn't enough time. So do it as soon as possible if you want that vote by mail ballot. To request it, again, you're just going to go to browardvotes.gov, or we do have the phone number located there. You can also do it in person at any of the Supervisor of Elections offices, or you can even do it in writing. There are 2 things that you do need to provide based on the new Florida election laws. You either have to provide a Florida driver's license or ID, or the last 4 digits of your Social Security number. So those items do need to be provided when you request your vote by mail ballot. They have a new system here in Broward County for tracking your vote by mail ballot. It's called Ballot Tracks. You sign up at browardvotes.gov. It's kind of hard to find sometimes. It's on the left column, and just scroll down. But when you sign up, you're going to receive notification when your ballot is printed, when it's mailed to you, when it's received back at the Supervisor of Elections office, and when it's counted. And those notices can be received via email, text, or phone call, and you can have it done in the language of your choice. So if you are primarily a Spanish speaker, that is how you can have that information sent back to you. But this way you can figure out where your ballot is at any point in the process. And before you could do it, but you had to go to the website and keep typing in your information. This is an active process. Once you're signed up, you will receive those notifications. You don't have to keep going someplace to look it up. It's going to notify you. There's 3 parts in the vote by mail ballot. You have the actual ballot, and mark your choices with a black pen. Don't use a black Sharpie because that soaks through the paper. Use a simple black ink pen, and be sure to completely fill the oval. Don't use a check, don't use an X, complete the oval. Then that ballot goes inside the privacy sleeve, and the privacy sleeve with the ballot then goes inside the prepaid, pre-addressed mailing envelope. And it's on the outside of that mailing envelope that you sign your name. It's very useful to also add your email and/or the telephone number, because if there is a problem with your signature, the elections office can contact you quickly. They're going to have an address and they will mail a form to you, but that's going to take days. And by having an email or a telephone number, that allows them to contact you as quickly as possible. The most common reason for a vote by mail ballot to be rejected is that there is no signature on the outside of the mailing envelope. Without that signature, your ballot will not be counted. So simply be sure to sign as indicated. It's all in bright red. You really can't miss it. If you're concerned about Postal Service delays, we recommend that you mail your vote by mail ballot no later than October 29th. And if you haven't mailed your ballot by October 29th, then you should take it to any of the early voting location drop boxes. It is important to understand that ballot must be received, not postmarked. It has to be received by the supervisor of elections office by 7 p.m. on election day. There are a lot of vote by mail ballots that are received after that time, and they are not counted. Those vote by mail ballots envelopes are not open. They are simply put into a secure location, but they are never open and they're never counted. Again, you can use the drop boxes. There are currently 24 early voting sites. Mr. Joe Scott, our supervisor of elections, is working on a 25th site, but right now there are 24. They will be open from October 24th through November 6th from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And each of them will have a secure drop box for your vote by mail ballot, or you can vote in person. The supervisor of elections office, there's 2 offices. There's one in Lauderhill. The actual office is behind the Lauderhill Mall. They will be open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. starting October 10th through November 8th. There is also the downtown office, which is at the County Government Center. And from October 10th through November 6th, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then on that Monday before the election day, and then on election day, they will have their drop box available 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. But it's really most convenient to take it to the early voting site. BrowardVotes.gov, that's where you go to find out where all those early voting sites are located, or there is a phone number there to call for a location closest to you. And that is the advantage of early voting sites, is that you can go to any of them. You don't have to go to the one that is closest to you. You can vote in person at your convenience during this time period, October 24th through November 6th. You can make it into a party. We've heard about vote and brunch. Go with a group of friends to an early voting site and then go out for breakfast or out for dinner. Just anything to make voting fun. We just want to be sure that people are voting. Now, when you do vote in person, You need to provide a picture ID with a signature to vote. If your photo ID does not display a signature, then you need to provide a second form of identification that has a signature. But the easiest thing to use, excuse me, is either your driver's license or your Florida ID. Those are the two easiest items to use. So of course you can vote in person on election day, which is November 8th, but we highly recommend to either use vote by mail and either mail it or to take it to an early voting location or use early voting sites. It reduces the lines that are going to be at the precincts. It also reduces the stress level for everyone because you have just a short time period on election day, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. You do have to have your picture ID just like you do for early voting sites. But the main issue with voting in person on election day is you have to go to your precinct. And people get confused about that and they end up at the wrong precinct. They may have stood in line for 30 minutes only to find out that they are at the wrong precinct. And then do they have time to get to the right location? With early voting, you don't have to worry about that. You can go to any other early voting sites. But on election day, you have to vote at your precinct. The other information that is so pertinent on election day is the vote by mail ballot cannot, let me repeat that, cannot be dropped off at the precinct on November 8th. On November 8th, the only places you can take that vote by mail ballot are to the supervisor of elections office, either downtown Fort Lauderdale or at the Lauderhill voting equipment site, which is at the Lauderhill Mall. So please do not bring vote by mail ballots to the precinct. They cannot be accepted. This is just a list of the exceptional picture IDs. You know, if you don't have a Florida driver's license or Florida ID, there's a number of different items that can be used. And I'll just mention again, if you know somebody who is having a problem obtaining these IDs, voteriders.org can help. Election Protection is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. The League is actually part of this coalition. If you have any problems voting, especially during early voting or on election day, you want to have these numbers. And I'm providing them here in English and Spanish. And this is the organization to call, and they will help you solve your problem. You will also see some of these people out at election sites. We'll have our election protection t-shirts on. Always feel free to ask anyone for help. That we're wearing gray t-shirts this year. So important dates for the general election. You have to register by October 11th. Selecting a party is not critical since it's a general election, but you do have to be registered by October 11th. About October 1st, we'll start to see vote by mail ballots mailed out if you've requested them in advance. Now, it takes a while for all the ballots to get mailed out, but that's the approximate date. October 24th to November 6th is early voting, 24 sites throughout the county, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. November 8th is election day. Hopefully, though, we hope that over 35 or 75% of the county is voted by that time. But on November 8th, you have to vote at your precinct, and you cannot drop off that vote by mail ballot at the precinct. Those vote by mail ballots have to be received, not postmarked, by 7 p.m. at the SOE office. In terms of what you can do to become an informed voter, you can watch various candidate forums. Lots of different party groups are Democratic or Republican Party groups are having candidate forums, as are HOAs, etc. The League has already sponsored judicial candidate forums and the school board district forums, and those can be viewed at our YouTube site. which is there on the screen or at our Facebook site. And that way you can become more informed about the candidates. Make sure your voter status is up to date, update your address, update your signature, check to see if you did request a vote by mail ballot and if it was received. And if you are using vote by mail, sign up for ballot tracks. The League has a site, vote411.org, which also has useful information. So like all the information I've just provided you about charter questions and the constitutional amendments, if you go to vote411.org and input your address, you look at find what's on your ballot, input your address, it's not saved, and essentially all the candidates and the ballot measures that will be on your ballot will show up, complete with the explanations. What we do is we ask candidate to respond in writing to specific questions that we've asked. We do not alter, we do not edit their questions. It's there for, again, for you to find out more information about the candidates prior to voting. Go to our website, lwvbroward.org. We have additional information that will be there by the middle of next week, and that would be by September 28th. And also invite us to speak on any other topics that we have. We have a lot of other presentations besides this one. If you want to hold a voter registration drive, we can help you do that. Moderating candidate forums, we are going to be doing that up until November 8th. We have printed voter guides, which we will distribute to the libraries. And these are specifically dealing with statewide candidates in the constitutional amendments. And that provides kind of a pros and cons of the amendment proposals, just like we were talking about today. Oops. Again, your vote is so critical. It is the way that you can project your voice to the elected officials. So vote we want you to vote, whether it's by vote by mail, early voting, or on election day. But the main thing is to vote. Thank you.